doing that scene, knowing that I wasn't going to be back.
In the late 1990s, Moesha was more than just a TV show. It was a cultural cornerstone, shaping how audiences saw Black family life, teenage struggles, and young love. But behind the laugh tracks, stylish outfits, and Brandy's iconic role, there were untold stories. Stories of tension, heartbreak, and tragedy that fans never saw on screen. What really went on behind the cameras of Moesha? And what secrets did the cast carry long after the show ended? Let's find out. At first glance, Moesha looked like the dream project, a glossy teenscape crowned by a bright R&B halo, a set where laughter ricocheted off lockers and living room walls.
That ring is the most expensive thing we own.
We?
A place where lessons wrapped neatly inside punchlines felt like home. Yet the glow hid a grind. The show launched in 1996 with a comet's velocity, and that speed demanded fuel, time, composure, and a kind of emotional stamina that few adults, let alone teenagers, could supply without consequence. Brandy Norwood was the face at the center, carrying scripts in one hand and studio headphones in the other, learning to split herself between a network sitcom and a charting music career without letting either falter. Fame pressed in from every angle. The camera captured what the public adored, while the schedule captured everything else. Early call times meant late homework. A triumphant Friday scene could be followed by a red-eye to a concert stage. Would the next take be sharp enough? Would the notes land? Would the audience still believe tomorrow? The pressure wasn't only personal, it was structural. Moesha carried the weight of representation in an era that asked Black shows to be flawless and universal at once. Should the storylines press into real-world edges, peer pressure, the clumsy politics of school dress codes, the awkward calculus of step-parents and teen authority, or should they stay buoyant, a weekly carousel of pop-bright dilemmas solved in 22 minutes? In the writer's room, debates stretched late. Notes arrived like weather fronts, rewriting comedy into cautionary tale, pushing a joke to the edge, and then pulling it back. The desire to be honest tugged against the demand to be safe, and both tugged against the grind of production. Every choice had a weight that outlived the episode. On screen, cast chemistry looked effortless. Off-screen, chemistry has a cost. Long shoot days meant schoolwork squeezed into corners, social lives conducted between takes, and private feelings saved for the ride home. For some, sudden visibility brought its own tremor. Malls became autograph gauntlets. Cafeteria lunches turned into press junkets. Mistakes acquired headlines. The set had warmth, yes, but it also had rules, schedules, and an invisible scoreboard. Who got the A story this week? Who delivered the monologue that made the audience hush? Who was learning? And who was winning? Ambition isn't ugly, it is simply bright. Under bright lights, it can blind. Typecasting hovered like a forecast everyone felt, but no one could quite change. The authenticity that made characters beloved sometimes became the box that later auditions could not unlock. Agents begged casting directors to see range. Casting directors nodded, then asked for something Moesha-ish. Careers move in seasons. Some actors felt their summers arrive early and end too soon. Others endured the subtler chill of being praised for a role while denied the space to reinvent it. The irony stung. The series that gave them visibility also made them easy to misread. Behind the camera, the frictions of show running rubbed against youth and expectation. Notes from network, ambitions from producers, and the reality of budgets formed a triangle that pinched. Schedules bent to accommodate music videos and promotional tours. Guest stars rearranged storylines. Multi-camera logistics demanded a precision bordering on ritual. When a teenager carries a show, every delay ripples. There were days when laughter came easy, and days when it had to be manufactured like weather.
Daddy, it's so simple. It's so obvious. It's so...
Not gonna happen.
On those days, jokes felt heavier, and the silence after cut felt longer than it should. To viewers, the world was bright and breathable. To those inside it, the air could thin. Jokes sometimes masked nerves. Smiles sometimes covered the tremor that arrives when the next take must be perfect, and the last one wasn't. The work was honest, it just wasn't easy. And because everyone was looking, there was little room for messy growth, the kind most teenagers do in private. Conflicts needed to resolve, apologies needed to land, lessons needed to crystallize by tag. Real life, however, resists tidy, yet the show birthed solidarity. In quiet corners, castmates traded notes on pressure and fear, swapped tips for memorizing lines between vocal warm-ups, shared food, shared laughter, and sometimes shared silence. There were birthdays in dressing rooms, tiny victories cheered between blocking and wardrobe, moments when the fiction of family softened into something real. The public saw a sitcom. The participants lived a life that alternated between sprint and sanctuary, bright noise and careful hush. Friendships were tested, and they were built. Some days the set felt like school. Success is a brilliant negotiator that always asks for more. The series joined a wave that changed the television landscape, and the asking increased accordingly. More authenticity, more sparkle, more responsibility, more restraint. Every decision landed on young shoulders learning, in real time, how to carry expectation without collapsing under it. Some days, they carried it beautifully. Some days, they set it down and hoped no one noticed. Either way, the camera rolled, and the audience believed in what they saw. Viewers remember the punchlines and the hugs at the credits. What they didn't see were the quiet recalibrations, the hushed conversations about fairness, the questions about pay versus impact, the uncertainty about what comes after a hit. For a few, the fear wasn't failing today. It was being frozen in yesterday's success. The glamour was real, yes. So were the sleepless nights, the second guesses, and the heavy crown of early excellence. And somewhere between those extremes lived the truth of Moesha, a set full of talent, learning how to survive success without losing the spark that created it. On screen, the Mitchell household closed each episode with hugs, lessons, and a full-table warmth that felt unbreakable. Behind that glow, however, lived a competitive ecosystem where young talent learned the difference between friendship and professional gravity. A hit shows no mercy to schedules or insecurities. It simply expands, demanding more lines, more laughs, more presence. As Moesha climbed, the spotlight narrowed around its star, and the orbit tightened for everyone else. No one doubted Brandy's work ethic, but fame has a way of turning balance sheets into fault lines. Who gets the big storyline? Whose joke becomes the tag? Whose close-up appears in the promo? The answers shifted week to week.
You told me to say that. And you notice that's the only lie they didn't catch you in.
Stirring feelings that were seldom spoken out loud, but often felt. Actors who had entered as peers began to experience the small hierarchies that develop when a brand must be protected and a schedule must be worshipped. Rewrites could shrink a scene overnight. A musical commitment could change a call sheet by noon. A guest star's availability might tilt an entire arc away from a supporting character who had been waiting months for a turn. None of it was malicious. All of it had consequences. In the lull between setups, minor disappointments could grow teeth. Countess Vaughn's comedic voltage as Kim Parker was unmistakable. Audiences adored her phrasing, her fearless physicality, the wild card timing that detonated laughs where none seemed possible. That electricity also created friction. Any ensemble must redistribute energy to keep balance, and a spark that bright will inevitably pull oxygen from somewhere else. Stories circulated about disagreements, cold mornings, and clipped conversations. Years later, different cast members would acknowledge that misunderstandings hardened into distance. Nothing derailed professionalism. The work aired on schedule, but the temperature shifted. Vaughn's eventual leap to the Parkers looked like a win, and it was. But it also read like an answer to an unspoken question. How much room was left for her heat on Moesha? Shar Jackson brought warmth and wit as Nisi, the best friend who could toss a side-eye and a lifeline in the same breath. Her rhythm kept scenes buoyant, but buoyancy is easy to overlook when drama sucks up oxygen. Industry gravity favors leads. Supporting players often carry the tone, while the plot rewards someone else. That dynamic, repeated over seasons, can sandpaper morale. Jackson, like others, navigated it with professionalism, but even quiet people keep score sometimes. The scoreboard wasn't about love or loyalty, it was about space. Marcus T. Polk grew up on camera as Miles. As the series matured, so did he, and growth brings questions. When the family's A stories tilted toward teenage romance or adult conflict, a younger character's moments could shrink, then vanish, then reappear with a punchline instead of an arc. Families evolve, shows do too. But for a child actor, visibility is a currency and a mirror. Being seen teaches you who you might be. Being benched teaches you what you might not be. The tension wasn't a scandal, yet it stung like one. None of this erased the affection that existed. The cast could still crack each other up between takes, still celebrate birthdays, still rally when one of them needed a hand. However, affection and ambition coexist like weather fronts. Sunny, then gusty, then suddenly storm bright. Award shows, magazine covers, and promotional tours layered comparison over camaraderie. In an era before social media metrics, the measurement tools were older, but just as sharp. Who appears on the poster? Who gets the final bow? Who sits center during interviews? Every answer confirmed a hierarchy that nobody designed, but everyone felt. The crew saw the fluctuations. They kept the machine moving, catching the vibe as surely as they caught the light. A frosty morning would thaw after a perfect take. A tight smile would soften after a genuine laugh. Still, the accumulation mattered. It is hard for teenagers to remain teenagers while the world insists they are brands. And brands hate parity. They demand a star. As seasons rolled, the show's success amplified choices that once seemed small. A haircut, a vocal run, a wardrobe tweak, each became a referendum. When a moment exploded with fan attention, credit and blame scattered unevenly, as if tossed by a stage fan. Meanwhile, friends drifted into different circles, not out of malice, but velocity. The center was crowded, orbits became safer. Phone calls took longer to return. Lunches got postponed. Distance disguised itself as adulthood. The great irony is that the on-screen family remained persuasive precisely because everyone was so good at their jobs. You believed the hugs because the craft was there, but craft can't always cancel the itch of imbalance. Small slights harden into stories. Stories turn into scripts that no one writes, but everyone performs. By the time anyone notices, the third act has arrived, and the ending has already chosen itself. Egos did not explode. They eroded. In Hollywood, erosion often looks like opportunity. Spin-offs, solo deals, fresh pilots, each a fresh start that also functions as a quiet goodbye. The show continued. The temperature changed. And for fans who watched faithfully each week, none of this was visible, which is the clearest proof that the cast kept delivering. Clashing egos did not destroy Moesha, but they reshaped it. The work remained, sharp and generous, even as private distances widened. That gap between performance and feeling is the hidden tax of early success. And when the bill finally came due, it did not arrive as scandal. It arrived as silence. The show that taught a generation how to laugh and listen could not shield its people from the harder lessons that wait outside a soundstage. Moesha glowed on Thursday nights, but the glow faded with the credits, and real life, unedited, resumed.
The show ran for 6 seasons and left a lasting impression on its star.
The cast learned that success cannot barter with fate, and that grief moves through the brightest rooms as if invited. The first blow arrived like a rumor and landed like a stone. Merlin Santana was gone. He had appeared on Moesha as Ohaji, a confident teen with a future drawn in permanent marker, and off-screen he stood at the cusp of adulthood with camera-ready charm and a growing resume. In 2002, he was shot and killed in Los Angeles at just 26. News broke in flashes, and then the stillness came. Co-stars blinked at televisions, answered phones, fell into the kind of silence that scatters conversations and rearranges friendships. One person's absence can make a room feel the size of a stadium. Another day at work suddenly required more breath than anyone had planned to give. Then came the loss of Lamont Bentley, Hakeem to fans who grew up believing he'd be there forever, with a grin, a bag of chips, and a line delivered at just the right slant. Bentley died in a car accident in 2005, barely 31. Tragedy does not negotiate, it adds. His memorials were filled with laughter, because that is what he gave. And they were filled with tears, because that is what he earned. For those who had spent seasons building a fictional family with him, the grief held a particular dissonance. Lines on a page promised he would return next week. The world outside the page said otherwise. Fans posted tributes. Colleagues replayed scenes on late-night loops that always stop too soon. Where the script once offered a tag, memory offered a montage. Yvette Wilson's passing in 2012 deepened the ache. As Andell Wilkerson, she anchored the show with a kind of comic wisdom that made the den feel like a refuge. Off-screen, she faced illness with a dignity that kept the spotlight on her work, even as her body asked for quiet. She died of cervical cancer at 48. The fact is simple. The meaning is not. To the people who had leaned on her steadiness during long nights and longer seasons, the news felt like the set itself had lost its heartbeat. When audiences revisit old episodes and laugh at Andell's perfectly timed advice, they are also hearing an echo. It is the echo of a performer who did her job so well that her lines feel like memories shared by a friend. These losses did not belong to tabloid culture. They belonged to colleagues and families, to communities that gathered quietly after credits rolled. The public saw headlines. The people who loved them saw empty chairs and unfinished conversations. Grief carved new maps for everyone left behind. It changed how reunions felt. It changed what nostalgia meant. It made the past heavier and the future stranger. Fans sometimes speak of a curse, the way people do when coincidence hurts too much to hold without a story. But there was no dark spell here, only the fragility that shadows every life and stands out starkly when the lives are public. What fame makes visible, grief makes intimate. In interviews years later, surviving cast members often paired laughter with hesitation, as if joy required permission. They celebrated one another's milestones and admitted that success carries a phantom limb, the sense that someone who should be here is not. Their memories worked like careful stitches, a prank in the hallway, a note left on a script, a late-night pep talk that landed like a hug. The losses also reframed the show's themes. Moesha had always balanced humor with sincerity. It asked teenagers to consider consequences and asked adults to remember empathy. After the tragedies, those lessons gained a new register. Viewers who returned to old episodes discovered different favorite scenes. A small apology suddenly felt monumental. A held gaze meant more. A throwaway joke turned into proof that a person had once stood there, clever and alive. The show became, for many, a memorial in motion, proof that art can hold a person's rhythm after the world has gone quiet. There were practical ripples, too. Charity events were organized. Advocacy posts went out. Stories were told at panels, not to replay pain, but to tether memory to purpose. Some castmates chose privacy. Others chose to speak. Grief respects neither calendar nor publicity plan. It arrives, interrupts, and stays. But it can be partnered with care. In that sense, the Moesha family remained a family, continuing the work of showing up even when the show had long since wrapped. What most fans never figured out is how much the laughter cost after the credits. The reruns feel light because the actors worked so hard to hold the weight off screen. They did not allow sorrow to rewrite the past, but they let it deepen the meaning of what they had made together. When the lights dim now and the theme song returns, you can hear it if you listen. Gratitude braided with grief, love braided with loss, a shadow that does not darken the picture so much as clarify what it captured. The sitcom world has always been fertile ground for speculation. When actors embody teenage crushes or heartfelt romances on screen, audiences often wonder if the chemistry lingers after the director calls cut. With Moesha, that curiosity was more than justified, Behind the light-hearted storylines and teenage dilemmas were whispers, subtle glances, and private bonds that hinted at more than just scripted affection. Fans suspected little, but insiders knew that not all of the sparks stayed confined to the stage lights. Brandy Norwood, at the center of it all, was America's sweetheart, young, talented, and watched with hawk-like intensity. Every move she made was scrutinized, every friendship dissected for hidden meaning. On screen, her character navigated relationships with Hakeem, Q, and other suitors, while off-screen, Brandy's real-life connections were far more complicated. Industry insiders suggested that her growing bond with Lamont Bentley, who played Hakeem, carried more weight than audiences realized. Their characters' slow-burn friendship evolving into romance mirrored a closeness that bled into real life. While neither ever confirmed anything beyond friendship, castmates would later allude to a connection that made their scenes together magnetic, as though reality seeped between the lines of the script. Another relationship that fueled speculation involved Countess Vaughn. Though she left Moesha after 4 seasons, Vaughn's time on the show wasn't without its share of intrigue. Off-set, Vaughn was known for her flirtatious humor and boldness, qualities that sometimes translated into private bonds that fans never witnessed. The natural camaraderie between her and other cast members occasionally blurred into deeper attachments. Some whispered about behind-the-scenes romances that never made it to the tabloids, shielded by the absence of today's relentless social media. Vaughn herself has since admitted that she sometimes struggled to separate the closeness of the cast from her own personal life, a struggle that played out quietly and without the public knowing. Shar Jackson, meanwhile, found herself entangled in one of the most talked-about off-screen dramas of the early 2000s. Though her storyline on Moesha rarely centered on romantic tension, her real-life relationships drew public scrutiny years later when her connection to Kevin Federline made headlines during his highly publicized split from pop star Britney Spears. For longtime Moesha fans, this revelation was a jarring reminder that the smiling best friend they knew from the show was quietly enduring a romantic storm that captured national attention. What audiences never connected at the time was how the light-hearted Niecy was portrayed so seamlessly, because Jackson, in real life, was already skilled at masking pain with humor. The romantic undertones didn't end with the core cast. Guest stars and recurring characters often stirred the pot. Behind closed doors, friendships sometimes blossomed into short-lived flings. The production environment, long hours, close quarters, and emotional scenes created fertile ground for sparks. Some romances were fleeting, fading before the tabloids could even speculate. Others lingered quietly, living in the spaces between rap parties and shared scripts. Fans watching Moesha never imagined that beneath the carefully scripted teenage love triangles, real emotions were weaving their way through the cast. Those private relationships, whether whispered rumors or subtle bonds, added another layer to the show's dynamic. For every smile or laugh captured on camera, there was the possibility that an unspoken tension or a secret closeness colored the performance.
Because I think I got so comfortable with acting, and I was really comfortable there. The show was doing really good.
The lines between performance and reality blurred, creating an undercurrent of drama that fans never figured out. What no one realized at the time was that these hidden romances, and the tensions they caused, would shape the cast's relationships long after the show wrapped. Some connections soured, some faded into silence, and some left behind memories that could never be erased. But as fans cheered for Moesha's romantic journey on screen, the cast's own love stories remained locked away, until years later, when fragments of truth began to surface. For all its influence, Moesha ended with a cloud of mystery that fans still debate to this day. After 6 successful seasons, the show came to an abrupt and unfinished halt, leaving viewers dangling with unresolved storylines and unanswered questions. Moesha had left for college, relationships were in flux, and, perhaps most famously, Miles, played by Marcus T. Polk, had been kidnapped in the show's cliffhanger finale. Audiences waited for resolution. They never got it. Behind the scenes, the decision to end Moesha was far more complicated than a sudden cancellation. Ratings had slipped slightly, but the show was still popular enough to warrant continuation. The real tension came from business politics and interpersonal rifts. UPN, the network that hosted Moesha, was shifting its priorities, funneling resources toward newer shows in an effort to broaden its demographic appeal. In that shuffle, Moesha found itself at the losing end of executive decisions. But network politics weren't the only factor. Cast dynamics had grown strained by the later seasons. Countess Vaughn had already departed for the Parkers, leaving a gap in the original chemistry. Brandy herself was increasingly pulled between acting and music, struggling to give her full attention to the series while balancing recording sessions and tours.
Because I kind of feel I want to save everything that I have for stage, so I don't do a whole lot of warming up.
For producers, the looming question became whether Moesha could survive without the same energy it began with. The infamous cliffhanger was originally written with a plan for resolution. Scripts for a potential 7th season included storylines that would have tied up Miles's kidnapping and Moesha's future. In fact, certain plot arcs hinted at spin-offs that could have expanded the universe. But as negotiations stalled and schedules clashed, the plans dissolved. What was left behind was a series finale that felt more like a pause than a conclusion. Fans were outraged. Letters poured in. Viewers demanded answers. For years, Brandy herself would field questions in interviews about what happened to Miles, whether Moesha would return, and why such an iconic show ended without closure. Even the cast expressed disappointment. Marcus T. Polk once admitted that the abrupt ending felt like a betrayal, not just to the audience, but to the characters they had worked so hard to build. The truth is that the show ended not because it had run out of stories, but because too many external forces collided. Networks shifted, egos clashed, and creative energy splintered. The finale became a symbol of unfinished business, a narrative left hanging in time. For fans, it was agony. For the cast, it was another reminder of how quickly Hollywood can change course. To this day, the unanswered questions remain a source of fascination. Would Miles have been rescued? Would Moesha's love life have finally settled? Would the Mitchell family have found peace? Fans never got to find out, because Moesha ended not with a resolution, but with silence. The end of Moesha didn't mean the end of its cast's stories. If anything, life after the sitcom revealed even more about the secrets and struggles that fans had never seen. Each actor carried the legacy of the show into new opportunities, and into new challenges that often mirrored the themes of the series itself. Brandy continued her career as a recording artist, releasing albums and touring worldwide. But her post-Moesha years were not without hardship. In 2006, she was involved in a tragic car accident that claimed another driver's life, an event that haunted her for years and cast a shadow over her otherwise brilliant career. Though she eventually found strength to continue,
It's been 20 years since the singer-slash-actress made her debut on the small screen in Moesha.
the incident reminded fans that even idols carry unbearable burdens off stage. Shar Jackson's life turned into tabloid fodder when her relationship with Kevin Federline intersected with Britney Spears' downfall. What fans never realized was how much Jackson endured privately during those years. She was thrust into the spotlight for reasons far from her talent, and though she handled the attention with dignity, the ordeal left scars. Countess Vaughn faced personal struggles too. After leaving Moesha for the Parkers, her career thrived, but in later years, she became candid about her struggles with self-esteem, health issues, and the pressures of Hollywood beauty standards. She revealed stories of being judged harshly for her weight, of enduring cruel comments that chipped away at her confidence. Her honesty years later gave fans a glimpse into a battle she had fought in silence during her sitcom years. Marcus T. Polk's journey was more troubled. Though he found some success in acting and music, his adult years were marred by legal issues and personal controversies. For fans who remembered him as the mischievous Miles, his real-life troubles were a sobering reminder of how difficult it can be to transition from child stardom into adult stability. Other cast members faced their own arcs, filled with triumphs and tragedies alike. For some, the shadow of typecasting never faded. For others, personal lives became public property. Yet through it all, the bond of Moesha lingered. Reunions brought both joy and grief, as surviving cast members reflected on their shared journey and the loved ones they had lost. The truth is that Moesha was never just a sitcom. It was a mirror of real life, messy, unfinished, filled with laughter and shadow alike. The secrets that fans never figured out weren't just about romances, rivalries, or endings. They were about people, real people, struggling to balance fame, identity, and the relentless passage of time. Moesha remains a landmark in television history, but its legacy is more complex than most fans ever realized. Behind the laughter were struggles, rivalries, romances, tragedies, and unfinished stories that shaped the cast's lives forever. What looked like fiction on screen was often tangled with reality off-screen. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Moesha, a reminder that even in the brightest lights, shadows always linger. What do you think was the show's biggest hidden secret? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the shows you thought you knew.